Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's joined in smoothly, and you guys had no technical glitches or confusions while you were joining in. Um, you guys can revert back over chat. You can ask us any queries, questions, or any sort of problems that you're facing with the interface over the chat facility. And I would request everybody to keep themselves on mute so that the speaker is audible to all the participants, and please try not to screen share while we're already screen sharing the presentation right now. Okay, great. So, hope you all are doing great. I'm excited to be here today. My name is Dolly, and I have my colleague Samina with me, and I have our ambassadors Ayushi and Vidit from ConnectFor. I'll be briefing you guys about today's activity. Before we start, I would like to brief you a little bit about ConnectFor. Well, most of you are already our partner NGOs and have experienced ConnectFor services. But just to reiterate, we are an online volunteering platform wherein we connect volunteers to various NGOs depending upon the kind of time and skill they have to volunteer. While the concept of monetary donation is very well established in India, we focus on empowering people to donate their time and skill to a certain cause. We are headquartered in Mumbai with a presence of in almost all the metro cities. Our engagement's aim is to ensure value generation for both the volunteers and the beneficiaries. We've partnered with around 420 plus NGOs across India and have connected them with more than 19,000 volunteers so far and helped them save around 2 crores so far only via volunteering. Well, you guys might be wondering how are we helping NGOs at this time during the lockdown? Well, we started off with the concept of virtual volunteering. We have a lot of requirements from the NGO which can be done remotely, such as annual report writing, managing the social media, just to name a few. Before we start off the discussion for today's webinar, I would like to introduce you to our host for today, which is Mr. Arun Sadev. He began his career as a civil servant in the year 1993 and served the government of India at different levels. Arun has over 2 decades of experience in public administration, disaster risk education, humanitarian affairs, capacity development, and program management. Presently, he is working as India Country Coordinator, United Nations volunteer. Hi, Varun. Hi, Arun. Before we begin, just a few activity instructions for everyone. We will have the event run as smoothly as possible. Participants, there might be a few technical glitches, but please cooperate with us as your AV experience depends upon your as well as the host or the speaker's internet speed and connectivity during the session. What you can do if you can't hear or see us, just relax. It's a very common problem that could happen anytime. Let us know on the chat facility over Google Meet or over WhatsApp, whatever difficulty you're facing. Check your internet connection, log out of the session, and try logging in again. Do not message more than once over the chat as it would hamper the experience of the other participants. Do not unmute and start speaking. Rather, just message on the chat or whatever problem you're facing, and we will try to fix it. Keep yourself on mute throughout the activity to avoid any sort of background noise. We will let you know if there is a need to unmute yourself. If you have any query, please message on the group. We will revert back to you. Post the session, we will be sharing a feedback form with you. Kindly fill the form with us to improvise. You can do it post the event or immediately during the session. We would really appreciate if you could share your experience with us over social media and refer us to other NGOs that could avail our services. You could tag UN volunteers and connect for on the social media handles. We will try to cover all the topics as per our experiences in this particular sector. But if you have any questions or any experience that you need to share, you can post it in the chat bot or you can email it to us, write it to us, and we will revert back to you. We have allocated 10 minutes for a Q&A session in the end. In case your queries are not resolved, then Please mention your queries in the feedback form and we will revert back to you over the email. I hope everybody, like nobody has any sort of confusion or any sort of queries right now. If you do, I'll give you a minute to mention it in the chat bot. Okay, amazing. So I am hoping that nobody has any confusion so far. All right, great. So to begin off, I'll quickly take you through today's topics that we will be covering. First and foremost is understanding what virtual volunteering actually means and what are the benefits of this particular model to NGOs. Then we will figure out the best ways to best ways of volunteer management. As NGOs, we all have different experiences when it comes to volunteer management. During the session, we will try to share a few insights on how to manage them best. In the end, we have allocated 10 minutes for a Q&A session. We will try to answer as many queries as possible at that time, according to the time we have in the end. Okay, so to begin with, let us decode the word virtual volunteering. Before we discuss virtual volunteer management, it is essential to understand the term volunteering. Volunteering is a voluntary act to act in recognition of a need without expecting anything in return. And due to the pandemic, since the volunteers cannot go on site, individuals at the comfort of their homes can volunteer. Volunteering helps in building relationship between key stakeholders, helping in fueling social change. It reminds us what it is truly to feel human and also to reiterate a few fundamental principles of living that we all are connected. Just to emphasize on how virtual volunteering has been such a great success, I'll just give you an example. So, as I said, that we are an online volunteering platform. We had around 369 new volunteers to sign up in the month of Feb, which was before the lockdown was implemented. But if you see now, only in the month of May, we had over 701 volunteers to sign up, which is almost the double. So, obviously, because everybody is sitting at home, they find it more convenient to volunteer. And I think it's a great opportunity for all the NGOs to, um, make the most of it. Let's discuss about some of the benefits of virtual volunteering. The first and the foremost one is the economic benefit. We all know that NGOs operate on limited resources. While the NGOs struggle to manage and allocate the limited resources that they have, volunteering is a great way to make ahead. For example, if you're having a professional to build your website, he would charge you anywhere between, say, 15,000 to 2,000 versus having a volunteer to do the same for free. Now, this is something that the volunteers can do virtually. Therefore, volunteering has a significant amount of economic benefit. The second one is making the best of the volunteers available right now due to the pandemic. The previous point of economic benefit is somewhere interrelated to this. We are an aggregator between NGOs and volunteers and have seen significant jump in volunteerism. Imagine having an NGO in a remote village in Maharashtra and having a very well designer from Bangalore, IT developer from Bangalore. So you can see the reach at which we can now attain volunteerism. Virtual volunteering is a way to bridge the gap between skilled volunteers and the NGOs in need. Moving on to the next benefit, which is self care. Obviously, individuals can,
Dolly, hi. Hi,
yeah.
I'm so sorry, Dolly. I guess we have problem with your screen. We like participants cannot see the screen. So can you
Oh,
share
okay.
the screen?
Yeah, yeah, I'll do that again. Mm, okay, can you guys see it now?
Yes, ma'am. It's better.
All right, great, great. Amazing. I hope that I was audible of all the points that I was speaking, right? Okay. So, due to the pandemic, an individual has more time in hand, feels frustrated sitting at home, and hence doing a good deed would make him feel better. We have seen a spike in individuals to sign up as a first time volunteer during the lockdown. Arun, how would you explain the benefits of volunteering to the participants today?
Uh, Thank you, Dolly, for having me here. Good afternoon, friends from NGOs and others. First of all, I would like to thank ConnectFor basically giving us opportunity to interact with you. I have two of my UN volunteers also in this call. Uh, so basically coming to online volunteering, as you know, it's a virtual volunteering. It's not a new thing, though in India now it's getting traction. But online volunteering has been there in various parts of this world. And in some countries, it's a very successful model for non-profits, NGOs, and civil society organizations. Coming to the post-COVID, as Dolly was talking, there has been, a lot of interest for the people because most of us are working from home, are restricted. So coming to the benefit part, what I would say that this virtual volunteering breaks the barrier of distance and time. There are volunteers who might be sitting maybe thousands of miles away from you, but if through online mediums they can provide support, there is nothing like that. Similarly, we all have to work within a specified time. Everybody has some responsibilities, but then online volunteering provides that opportunity to break that barrier of time. So I can take time out maybe late in the evening or maybe in the middle of night or early morning, and I can volunteer. So these two important dimensions which are not possible for face-to-face volunteering in terms of having motivated, energetic, passionate volunteers who have very good skills to support NGOs. They can basically do the volunteering through online mediums. Over to you, Dolly.
Amazing. Thank you for the insights, Arun. Moving forward, let's understand the best ways of volunteer management. Um, the best ways to first get volunteers to sign up on your platform or for your particular requirement is first and the foremost thing for any NGO is to recognize the need of the NGO, the things that can be accomplished via volunteering. So, needs of the NGO could be bifurcated into smaller tasks to make it interesting. Any task requires certain skills and competencies which could be listed separately from each other as they are two quite separate things. Skills are activities that the candidate can perform based on what they've learned in the past or from the qualifications that they have obtained. Competencies are the traits or the attributes an expert and a candidate can display in the role. An example of a skill is the ability to give an effective presentation. It is a skill that can be learned through study and practice. For example, if you need someone to build your website, you would need a volunteer with different skill sets. So you would need a website developer, you would need somebody to write the content, you would need somebody to design the graphics of that particular website. And an example of competency, on the other hand, would be strong communication with an innate characteristics of display that is displayed by the person. And an extra weightage is given to, say, behavioral competencies such as leadership, teamwork, flexibility, and all of that. Arjun, how would you decode the word understanding the need of the NGO here?
Yeah, so from our experience, what I can share is that, most of the time, maybe the smaller NGOs particularly, they are not able to articulate their needs. So there are ample opportunities to hire volunteers online and get the work done. But the basic nuances of getting the work done through online volunteer, the first and foremost need is, of course, knowing that what I want to get done. So if in a project, like if the NGOs are developing a project or developing a proposal, if right in the beginning, at the inception stage, if they can have a checklist kind of thing and see that which of the tasks which they are going to do, which of the tasks could be done by volunteers, which of the tasks could be done by their staff, which can be done by other counterparts in the project. That would be the, I think, beginning point. And if they can think end to end and try to see that how volunteers could complete the task in task assignments in the overarching theme, not just for coming and doing some small bits and pieces. So if you think in a holistic manner right at the beginning of your project proposals, I think you can identify your needs, and that will really help you to identify right kind of volunteers. Over to you, Dolly.
Okay. Moving on to the next point. Uh, Sorry. Okay, so now that you've identified the kind of need the NGO has, make sure to have an interesting volunteering opportunity so that anyone reading it for the first time feels excited to contribute to that particular cause. For example, if there is a need for a teacher volunteer at your NGO, the way you can pitch that opportunity could be share your knowledge to make a difference to less privileged kids from XYZ community, or get a chance to make a difference to X number of lives while you invest only, a few hours in the day. So another way could be, innovative ways in which you do volunteer beneficiary interactions, as nowadays people cannot physically come to the NGO center to see the impact that they're creating, but you can do audio. So one of the ways to do it could be, say, podcast, or to record audio books on various topics that the NGO is really looking for, which can be shared with the beneficiaries over, say, WhatsApp or a YouTube link, but the volunteer still sees the difference that he's making. The second would be to reach out to different platforms like ConnectFor or UN volunteers, etc. So, if you're looking for a particular skill set or an experienced volunteer, you need to know how to reach out to them. For example, there are various platforms available in the market today, such as ConnectFor and UN volunteers, where you are getting volunteers for free and they're skilled and experienced, which makes it easier for any NGO to reach out to the niche market that they're looking for. This could also be referred to you by other volunteers. So if a volunteer is already working with you, you can ask that volunteer to get other volunteers in their reach to come and work for you. Arun, how would you explain, that platforms like ConnectFor or UN volunteers works perfectly when it comes to finding a volunteer?
Yeah, so these platforms basically work as a marketplace, and you have all kinds of volunteers, both skilled and non-skilled, who are enlisted there, who have registered themselves. And in India particularly, and in other countries also, we have experienced that volunteers are very passionate people, so they sign up. So signing up is not such a big barrier, but then managing their expectations, that is the key for NGO partners. So the NGO partners who are registered in either ConnectFor or even volunteer, wherever they are, so they have to see that how we are going to manage expectations of the volunteers. And as we know that in the digital world, and when the span of of working online is not very long sometimes, and people are having are becoming impatient. So very short video kind of so small work to be done, which can be done by volunteers, for example. What we have done in India, particularly for our platforms, that we create opportunities which excites volunteers. So I would also like to request my colleague Rishi Bansiwal, who is one of the points for our online work. If you can also share your thoughts, Rishi.
Yeah, thank you, Arun, and thank you everyone for calling us out here. Probably for this, to reaching out to different kinds of volunteers, we have so many platforms like, as Dolly mentioned, Connect for and UN volunteers. But before that, as we have already discussed, like understanding your needs in terms of like, do you need expert volunteers? Do you need event-based volunteers? And do you need volunteers to be engaged on specific tasks? So if that is clear from your end, then you can definitely engage the volunteers for the benefit. And if you will be able to brainstorm a little bit in your management teams, like for what purpose the volunteer is required and what would be their journey throughout the assignment, that can also help you out in deciding like what could be the outcomes of the volunteering engagement. So yeah, that's it from me. I think over to you, Dolly.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, Dolly, what I would
Yeah.
like to add here, just one liner, that whenever you are coming up with your volunteering assignment opportunities, try to be creative, because that is what attracts volunteers. Be very short, specific, crisp, but it has to be a bit creative, because that is what drives the volunteers. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. As rightly mentioned by Arun and Rishi, that it is very important for any NGO to make sure that the need that they have is interesting. So to make it interesting and to reach out to platforms where you have greater reach, greater visibility for your requirements. The other process, or like the other ways to manage your volunteers, is to internally manage the volunteerism at the NGO. So set up processes internally. So NGOs also need to strategize better when it comes to allocating resources, and here by resources I mean volunteers. So you could do resource allocation in terms of like knowing the kind of volunteers you need to assign for a particular role, have an application process or an application form to get the volunteers to sign up, so it reduces your lag time to get connected to the volunteer may or may not respond to you over the calls, but you could gauge their interest over the form, speak with, like, get their experiences over the form or an email, ask questions related to the task to understand the domain knowledge of that particular volunteer, which would reduce the turnaround time for that volunteer to actually come and start working for you. Then drive the culture of volunteerism at the NGO. So volunteering is a very new and an unexplored area for a lot of NGOs that we work with. And hence it becomes very important for NGOs to drive the culture of managing the volunteers with the staff of the NGO as well. So for example, you could be conducting workshops on communication, assisting in recruitment and staffing for your staff, which would help a better give a better experience to the volunteers who are coming and working for you. New plans for engaging the volunteers, which we will be explaining in detail in the coming slides. Obviously, as Arun mentioned earlier, develop a marketing plan to gain more attraction on the volunteering need that the NGO has. For example, spread a word about the work and the impact in a creative manner. Be more creative when it comes to showcasing the work that you're doing. Then we have our very favorite social media, and this would not be true only for the volunteers, but also for your fundraising strategies. Volunteers could also help you set up your social media handles, how social media opportunities could be to gain more attraction. You could use some of the services that ConnectFor or UN Volunteer has in terms of like showcasing the work that you're doing, having to reach out to more volunteers or reach out to more eyes when it comes to the work that you're doing. Arun, how would you how would you explain a marketing plan for an NGO when it comes to, finding a volunteer or like showcasing the work that the NGO has?
Yeah, so actually seeing is believing, no. So I would urge the NGO partners, particularly to see from basically the perspective of volunteers, what they would be interested in. So that is one. Secondly, you have to have a very robust internal process, which we talked about, Dolly. So some kind of very brief document, SOP, a standard operating procedure, or whatever you name it. So have that ready and available in your website. You can just say, maybe enlist some of the basic steps. How, if somebody is interested to volunteer with your organization, what are the processes to be followed end to end, so that confidence building is very important for the volunteer to connect with to the organizations. So I think process part is important, but it should not be a very lengthy process or a cumbersome process or sometimes time-taking process. It should be clearly defined, maybe in a flow chart with a step-by-step process, so that volunteers get a sense of how they are going to complete their assignments. So over to you, Dolly.
Yeah, that is beautifully explained by you, Arun. Moving on to our next process could be group volunteering opportunities or weekend volunteering opportunities. So what we have actually experienced so far is that maybe a first time volunteer or an individual who has never volunteered before could get a taste of what volunteerism is like via a group volunteering activity. So maybe friends or families can together volunteer over a weekend with your NGO. So this would help one to understand the work that the NGO is doing and see the impact that the one has created by investing a few hours. So ConnectFor has been planning and executing group volunteering opportunities since last year. And on an average, we used to get around 5 to 10 volunteers to turn up for our on-ground activities on every weekend. But ever since we've moved to a virtual model due to the lockdown, we have seen volunteers attending the session would be around anywhere between 30 to 35 every weekend. Just to give you some stats, say in the month of February, we had 11 activities over the whole month, and in totality, we had around 220 sign-ups or 220 people to sign up for these activities. Versus in the month of May, where we had three activities and we had 329 volunteers to actually sign up for the activity. So not only we've seen a jump in the people signing up for the activities, but we've also seen a higher turnout ratio for these volunteers to come and attend the events. So again, like the kind of activities that you could do to give a taste of volunteerism to these NGOs to these volunteers could be beneficiary interactive or non-beneficiary interactive. So for non-beneficiary interactive, just to give you an example, would be, say we recently had one of our activities with specially abled beneficiaries where the NGO wanted to record stories on various different topics, and we had volunteers to actually come on the platform together, and they recorded different stories on different topics, which helped NGO to build a whole content library for themselves. So the second one could be a beneficiary interaction where we recently did something called as Simon Says. It was a fun recreational activity. No, like literally no rocket science here, where we had kids and volunteers to play Simon Says with each other. Where the volunteer said, "Simon says, go brush your teeth, go tie your shoelace," and the beneficiary said, "Okay, Simon says, go take a selfie with your mom" or something like that. So again, like the experience could be both beneficiary interactive or non-beneficiary interactive, but for a volunteer it gives more experience when it comes to understanding how the NGO works. Arun, could you explain how UN volunteers have been listing opportunities by these NGOs or some of the opportunities that you have received from these NGOs, which is very exciting and new?
Yeah, so globally we have very big works being done by volunteers, which are very economically. It has make a lot of sense. So, for example, I give for our own work, so that basically will help NGOs to understand that it's not only NGOs or a small organizations who are using online volunteers. Organizations of United Nations like UNICEF, UNFPA, UNDP, even volunteers, everyone is using online volunteers. Very recently, UN volunteer headquarters, because we have plethora of data, no? So across the globe, we work in more than 130 countries. So we had one opportunity for online volunteers to do analysis and come up with dashboard for UN volunteers. And we had five teams actually coming together at different continents. So for each, like we had from Asia Pacific, and then of course America and Europe and Middle East. So that kind of teams, and they worked for about
Hello. Hello, Arun.
go and not easy to do that. You will, yeah.
Sorry, your voice was cracking. Could
Am
you
I
repeat the
audible?
last sentence? Yeah,
Dolly, can you
I can hear you, Arun. Could you repeat the
I
last
think network
sentence?
here is going okay. No, what I was saying that the kind of work they presented, if you go and get similar work done by any private company, it will cost you, it's a bomb kind of thing. So just for the sake of understanding of our NGO partners, they should see that this kind of work can be done in groups, and the group tasks by the NGO, by the volunteers sitting in different cities and different places is very much possible. We have again, I will give you an example that we have of our documents which we produce in India, formatted, designed, all kind of graphics, etc., done by the volunteers. Because we unless we take ownership, unless we promote online volunteering, how other NGOs can do that? So don't hesitate and come up with innovative work assignment for volunteers, and I'm sure you will find skilled volunteers to get your work done.
Okay, amazing, Arun. I know a lot of participants are raising queries on the chat. We will be, doing a quick Q&A session in the end. But in case you think any of your queries is not resolved through this particular webinar or in the end with a Q&A session, you can actually write to us over the email. Arun and I, we will discuss it and we will share the best possible solution to your queries. Okay, so moving ahead, now that we know how to get a volunteer to sign up, now that we have processes set internally in terms of managing a volunteer, let's understand how do we assess a volunteer once he's already started working with us. So one is understand the skill the volunteer gets to the table. It becomes very important for the NGO to understand the kind of volunteer one individual is, the kind of skill set that he brings to the table, if they are a working professional or a student or between jobs, etc. You can do this by understanding the past work that they have done. You can ask for the other organizations that they worked with to share some references for that particular volunteer. You can ask for a volunteer to share their past experiences or the past work that they have done in order to understand the kind of skill sets and the kind of expertise that particular individual has on a particular domain. Then would be the time management. So again, like as Arun mentioned, there are volunteers from across the globe who want to work with NGOs with supporting different cause verticals. So you have to understand the language barriers, the time differences. Say for example, if you have somebody volunteering with you from USA, there is a time difference of say X hours, then you will have to come up with a standardized process in terms of how would you communicate with that particular NGO when it comes to sharing data, when it comes to communicating your feedback and all of that, because you would not get the reward at the same time. Match the need of the NGO to the skill set that the volunteer has to offer. So now this you can understand via the application process. So now, for example, how would you know that? And how would a few ways could be to ask the volunteers to share their past experiences. For example, if you have a volunteer to write a blog for you, you can ask them to share the previous blogs that they've written in the past. This will help you to gauge the caliber of the volunteer and accordingly set the expectations. Now that you know that the volunteer possesses certain skills, match them with the needs of your NGO. You can do this over an application form, as Arun also mentioned earlier, and you can decide whether that particular is accepted or rejected for that particular job profile that you are looking for. Arun, how would you explain certain aspects of volunteer assessment here?
Yeah, actually we have learned in the past years, and what we do that our platform provides an opportunity to be posted by the registered NGO partner, and then any number of volunteers depending on the skill sets required for that opportunity, because opportunity itself defines that what is expected for this volunteering assignment. So for that, many volunteers who are registered in the system will apply, and the NGO partner has the opportunity to scan the applications and see who are the best suited. And then so that's the process part. The second important part with the volunteer assessment, how you are going to define your kind of work, which I also talked in the beginning. So whenever you are submitting your opportunities, you should define it to the maximum possible. So make it as clear as possible, and the kind of skill set you are looking for, kind of basically outputs you are looking for. So that will help the volunteers to apply and also better manage their expectations. Over to you.
Okay. The next step in terms of assessing your volunteer could be volunteer orientation. I think volunteer orientation becomes an integral part for an individual's relationship with the NGO. This will help the volunteer to understand the culture of the organization, make them connected to the cause that the NGO is supporting. With concise and accurate information, makes him or her more comfortable in the job that they have signed up for. Do not invest a lot of time to share this data, but make sure to cover up all the relevant information that showcases the work that the NGO is doing. Orientation also helps build a rapport between volunteer and the NGO, and hence promotes communication between the NGO and the new volunteer. Again, here define the rules and the regulations of your workplace safety and a few policies of that particular NGO. So a few NGOs have policies where there is no touch policy. A few of the NGOs have policies where you're not allowed to click pictures and all of that. So all of this could be covered during the orientation session. Now, once the volunteer is allocated task and starts working, it becomes important to timely assess the work done by them and provide frequent feedback. Help This would help you meet the deadlines. The volunteer will understand the urgency of the work, and it will also help the NGO to understand at the pace at which the volunteer is working. So then you can then know if you need more volunteers or like more man hours to be put to accomplish that particular task. Next would be improvisation and feedback. I think this is one of the most important aspect of volunteer assessment, because see, top performing companies are top performing companies because they consistent, consistently search for ways to make themselves better. It's true. It's a true focus based on feedback from across the entire organization. So it could be your customers, clients, employees, the suppliers, your vendors, your different stakeholders, your trustees, etc. So information can be used to make better informed decision. Similarly, for NGOs, the feedback can come from project manager, the project head, whoever's handling that particular volunteer. This also allows the NGOs to build and maintain the communication with others. And I strongly believe that feedback also acts as a motivation. It helps to improve the performance and hence improve the particular project in itself. And it's a tool for continued learning for both the organization as well as the volunteer. Arun, how would you explain, improvisation and feedback when it comes to volunteer assessment?
Yeah, very quickly, we have also similar arrangements. So where volunteers, after they complete their assignments, the NGO partner has the opportunity to assess the quality of work in terms of the outputs and also in terms of timelines. And then only on the satisfactory completion of assignments and certification by the NGOs, the volunteer gets a certificate jointly issued by the NGO partner and the even volunteers. So coming to the feedback, which is most important part of the volunteering assignment, because that is how both partners and including the managing partner like even volunteer or ConnectFor, they learn lessons and accordingly improvisation can be done. So completing the loop in the feedback right from the volunteer assignment to the end and the feedback would be equally important. And when you are devising your process, your SOP, you should have those clearly defined again. And feedback remains one of the important, I think, aspects of the entire volunteer management.
I totally agree with you. Moving ahead, it's very important for NGOs to keep themselves updated with the latest. Sorry. Now, due to the lockdown, everything started moving quickly to, virtual session. Everybody has access to PCs, laptops, mobiles. We have more people connected to internet today than ever. And I think it's very important for for the NGOs to actually grab the opportunities that they have right now and make the most of it. The last and the most important part of volunteer assessment is to monitor the impact and measure it. So, to keep the track of the work that the volunteer has been doing, it is very important. It is a very important process to measure the impact that they have created. You could Certain ways to do this could be to generate a rate card for the task to be accomplished via volunteering. So, as mentioned earlier, you need to recognize the needs of the NGO. Once you recognize the need of the NGO, make a rate card for that particular task. You can see, for example, if you want a volunteer to write a 300-word blog, you know the amount of hours that particular volunteer needs to put in to do that. You know the amount of monetary impact that particular volunteer will be making. So if you were to give that particular task to a professional, so you know the kind of impact that you're creating via volunteering, and this will help you have more volunteers for future, because you can see the success or see the amount of difference that they're making to your NGO. Moving ahead to the next point would be how communication acts as a very important key. So once you know a volunteer wants to work for your NGO, take the initiative to start the conversation. If somebody's shown interest on your platform, on any of the other platform, has dropped you an email or something like that, take the initiative to actually go forward and start talking to them. Since each volunteer comes from a different background, decide on a comfortable platform to communicate with them. For example, some of them could be comfortable only via call. Some of them would be comfortable with our very favorite WhatsApp. So create a broadcast list of over WhatsApp group, give them timely updates, give the progress of the NGOs and the initiatives that the NGOs been taking to all the volunteers that you've connected. Next would be to, as Arun had also mentioned about outlining the processes or outlining the project, which is to be shared with the volunteer. So both the parties know and follow the deadline. They understand the urgency and the importance of the task that is allocated to the volunteer, and the NGO takes the initiative to follow up here. So Arun had rightly mentioned it earlier as well, that the deadlines are to be followed, the projects outline are kept in place so that both the parties know the progress of that particular project. Now, again, as Arun had mentioned earlier, that everybody is coming from a different background, everybody is coming from a different time frame or a work background. Decide on a platform, a mutual platform that you can use to share the data. For example, if you have a volunteer to build your website, then how would you test it? Would you go live and do the testing? Would you do it on the back end and then put it up on a live session? How would you do it? So before you send it out to the volunteer, make sure you internally have these processes set in place. Coming on to our last and the most important part is volunteer engagement plan. This is something that Arun and I have been discussing in the earlier slides as well. How internally decide on the kind of task to be allocated to the volunteer. It is very important that before we assign tasks to a volunteer, we do our homework and set the expectations. We should have a rough sketch or an outline ready for the task. For instance, if you are assigning a volunteer for, say, social media posts, then explain them what are the certain celebrations that are coming up for that particular week, for that particular month, the date on which it needs to go out, the date when it needs to be reviewed by the NGO, the time of publishing, and everything should be pre-decided. So keep a track of the impact that is generated by the volunteer. As we mentioned earlier, have a rate card type of an instrument to assess the work that an NGO is doing. Volunteer recognition is one of the most important tool of volunteer engagement, which we will discuss in the later slides. Support the evolution of volunteers by giving them a chance to directly interact with the beneficiaries. We as ConnectFor have tried and tested that when you offer simple and fun tasks involving beneficiaries, volunteers get engaged better and stay longer as they feel connected to the cause. So ConnectFor has services named, which we mentioned earlier about group volunteering, where I mentioned about Simon Says, or a DIY session, a story curation, or something like that. So participating in challenges on social media are such simple activities. Arun, how would you quickly summarize volunteer assessment or like volunteer engagement plans here?
I would also like my colleague Anubha, who is a communication person, to talk a bit about it. Anubha, if you are online, can you come for a minute and then I will wrap up?
Sure, sir. Thanks, Dolly. Hi, everyone. Like Arun has already mentioned, online volunteering platforms, be it ConnectFor or be it the online volunteering platform with UNV India, they act like a marketplace or the mediator between organizations and volunteers. Especially right now, like during these times, online volunteering is mutually benefiting both NGOs and volunteers. So UN organizations and other NGOs have been using OV for web designing, translations, video editing, data management, and other tasks that require specialized skills. To market it better, I think, like we've already spoken about, optimizing the experience of online volunteering. It is very important to engage volunteers in exciting work and encourage and award them for their work by giving certificates or recommendations. On our system, we also have a two-way feedback system where we have volunteers, where the volunteers evaluate the organization and the organizations evaluate the volunteers. So just making the experience more seamless and easily accessible to people who are not just living in a rural setup, urban setup, but also people who are living in a rural setup, making it more inclusive, like Dolly mentioned, for differently abled people or for people with lesser accessibility. I think that should be the promotional strategy. As for benefiting, I think personally, because I've seen it from both sides, since I've been an online volunteer myself and now I work with online volunteers, I think it is a great way to efficiently and creatively work towards achieving organizational and personal goals. So I think just making the experience more palatable for different and varied users would be the way to go.
Thank you, Anubha. So I will be very brief. Anubha has touched upon the points. For NGO partners, the most important is how you recognize the volunteers who have volunteered their time and skill and expertise. We have been, basically promoting them in our social media network, and also we try to bring them to when opportunity comes. Of course, during COVID, it's not there, but once the restrictions are lifted, how we bring them to various events and how we actually recognize their work in public. So recognition is the underlying force which makes volunteers to volunteer their time. So the key task would be like key takeaway for the NGO partners would be to basically see that how you are able to recognize the work they do. Over to you, Dolly.
Thanks, Anubha and Arun. I think Anubha mentioned a very good point of a two-way feedback. It helps a volunteer to understand the work that they are doing. And it also helps the NGO to improvise on the task or the work that they are assigning to the volunteers. And as Arun rightly mentioned about rewards and recognition, I mean, who doesn't like getting recognized? So to keep the volunteers motivated, we need to incentivize them and keep rewarding them time to time. And there are certain simple things to do that can actually motivate a volunteer. So just to name a few would be certificate of accomplishment. So once they completed a task or an assigned task for a number of hours that they have committed, you can provide them with a certificate. And nowadays, a lot of colleges and schools give additional scope for serving the society. And this certificate especially holds a lot of value when they go abroad for higher education. Likewise, even for corporates where they value these kind of services a lot. Reference letters or LinkedIn recommendations. A reference letter is as good as recommendation letter, which comes directly from the NGO and describes the work that the volunteer has been doing. A LinkedIn recommendation post project completion is a great value for employee volunteers as well. Post out the completed projects such as annual reports or other publications. When a volunteer gets to see the hard work that he or she has put in, it has been appreciated, it gives them a certain side, certain sense of pride of them. Regular group meetups with games, so we can always demand work from our volunteers, but we also forget that work is also fun. So every now and then, make sure to have an engagement with your volunteers. Plan a small, maybe an hour session or maybe a 20-minute session with your volunteers. You could play some games, you could play some sort of quiz. Publish the work of the volunteers on different platforms. When you publish the work of a volunteer, it gives him a motivation to do better and work more for the society. So maybe he's volunteered once, but if he feels motivated through these recognitions, he would volunteer again. And we have a very favorite shout out on social media platforms. Appreciate their work that they are doing on their social media. Help them, tag them. Ask them to retag, or like repost the post that you've done. It will help you also to have more visibility on social media handles. Now we move on. I know we are a little behind, like I think we are 5 to 6 minutes behind our schedule, but we move on to our Q&A session. If you don't mind, can we take up around 2 to 3 questions right now?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so volunteers, you can actually participants, you can actually list down your questions on the chat bot, and Arun and we will be happy to answer you guys right now. And if any of the queries are not resolved right now, we will email it to you after we discuss a strategy for you. So yeah. I'm just waiting for people to write on the chat bot, but there were a few questions that were raised earlier. So what are the safety measures we should take when we are involving volunteers in online teaching? So the ways that we can actually set out a few rules and regulations internally or as a company policy or like as an NGO policy in terms of what are the do's and don'ts. So for example, as we are doing the session today, we had a couple of do's and don'ts for our own session where the participants had to be on mute, where the volunteers were given deadlines to be submitted and all of. So create clear steps and processes to be taken. So for example, the kind of content that needs to be shared by the volunteer, get it pre-approved internally by the NGO. If you have an internal facilitator or an internal teacher, ask that person to closely monitor the kind of work the volunteer is doing, the kind of language that they are using, the kind of graphics that they are using. All this should be monitored and then should go out to the students or to the public outside. Arun, how would you say that how to reduce back and forth communication with the volunteers, as this is a lot of unproductive time for the NGOs?
Yeah, so communication remains the major, I think one of the major components for a successful volunteering, particularly when you are not face to face. So I will recommend that if you have very clearly laid out, do's, don'ts, and this process and a mechanism as to how to involve volunteers, makes a lot of sense. Secondly, also like safety is the paramount, both for online and offline. So we have introduced code of conduct. So every online volunteer or virtual volunteer has to undertake certain, oath kind of thing that he or she will be following certain basic ethics and rules while engaging online. And Very important would be like, if you like, there was a question on teaching. So unless you know the what kind of topics, what are the contents. So I think prior weighting of those contents will be very important and effective. Avoid any sort of subsequent complications. These are some of the thoughts I think NGOs can keep in mind.
Okay. Pooja, for like to share any sort of negative feedback with the volunteer, I think a way to do it would be to subtly put out the feedback that you have. You can actually tell them the ways to improvise the feedback that you have. Say, for example, if you think that the blog had a lot of grammatical errors, you can actually give them alternate solutions in terms of how to improvise that, how to improvise certain aspects in which they can improvise the kind of work that they are doing. So maybe it will act as a negative feedback, but it will also help them improvise the work that they're doing in the coming task or the coming months. So though you give them a feedback, give them a way or like a solution on how to handle this particular situation.
Dolly, may I come in for a minute here?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so this is, I think, one of the constant, coming up issue when you involve volunteers online. And I would suggest that if you are giving some assignment, don't wait until end and then you get to, conversation with the volunteer. If you are engaged throughout the process, so for I will give you an example. If I give some work which is related to translation, there are software which translates literally, and those translation doesn't make any sense sometimes. So right in the beginning, of course, you have to put your expectation and give some guidance to the volunteer. But at the same time, from time to time, you are engaged with the volunteer to understand the kind of work, time, energy the person is putting. So that will help both volunteer and the NGO partner. So your time is saved, your efforts are saved. Otherwise, at the end, you might not get the kind of product you are expecting. And it will apply for all kinds of online work, whether it's a proposal writing or IC development and stuff like that. So quality and satisfaction, these two are very important from both the players, uh, volunteers as well as NGO partners. So constant sort of communication will help.
I totally agree with you, Arun. I totally agree. Arun, can you take up one question more, or should we wrap up?
Yeah, if there are questions, I can take it quickly.
So, what are the challenges in keeping virtual volunteers motivated?
So anyone like keeping volunteers motivated itself is a big challenge because when you are online, the challenge becomes more prominent and more profound. And online volunteers, we have seen that if you are doing some capacity building for them, if you are interacting with them, you are creating some platform where they are coming together discussing because they may be working for different NGOs, but there are certain things which they can share with each other and learn each other. So that is the way, like engaging with them will be, I think, the solution particularly for virtual mode. So if you can create some kind of platform for interaction, maybe on a weekly basis, where they can have some fun also and come up with some creativity and learn from each other. So that's how I would suggest.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Arun said, to keep them engaged through and through, make them feel important and make their work feel more important. So let them see the impact that they are doing, let them see the few hours that they put in impacts largely to the NGO. So that is one thing that will really keep anyone motivated to work ahead, I think. Also, just to this is not relevant to the Q&A session, but we have a feedback form for everyone, and we would really appreciate if everybody could give us your feedback. If any of your queries remains unsolved during the session, you can mention it in the feedback form, and we will be very happy to revert back to you over the email. And if you've not partnered with ConnectFor or with UN, you can write that in the feedback form as well, and we will get in touch with you. Um, yeah. Arun, do you have any closing points for the session?
No, I think we have covered quite a ground within 1 hour, and I really would like to thank you and all the colleagues from ConnectFor, and particularly the NGO partners and people who have been able to join us, and hope they might have got some perspective. And this is actually learning by doing for the NGO partners also. I understand that there are small challenges will be coming up. But my final words would be like, volunteers are a great resource. They have great potential to perform, and not only for your organization, but for any number of organizations across the country.
Excuse me.
And in India, we have not been able to actually capitalize on volunteering opportunities which are available and the kind of work volunteers can do both online and offline. So I would request all NGO partners to keep volunteers as a renewable resource which can help them in the long run. There may be sometimes you might not be very happy, and you might be thinking that your time and energy is unnecessarily getting into a small things which while involving volunteers. But in the long run, I can guarantee you that you will have a lot of satisfaction once you streamline your processes, and the volunteers also gain some sort of expertise in how to perform. So with these words, I would request NGO partners to use more and more volunteers for their work going forward. Over to you, Dolly.
Yeah, amazing. Arun, I think you've beautifully explained the whole concept of volunteering in just like a few minutes. But yeah, I think what you mentioned correctly was, volunteering is a great resources that all the NGOs should avail. And I think reaching out to platforms like UN India or Connect4 would help NGO understand the kind of needs that can be fulfilled via volunteering. It will help them get connected to these kind of volunteers who can actually do some amazing work that that a skilled volunteer can do. So yeah, I think um, that I think summarizes our session for today. And I hope everybody has had a great time, and the time that you've invested was really fruitful. Um, if you have any other queries or you have any feedback to be shared with us, you can write back to us. You can message on the WhatsApp group that we have. We will be sharing a thank you email with you guys, where we will be also posting the presentation that we've shared today, so that you can use it for your future references, or you can use it in the future, or like capacity build your own NGO and make them understand the kind of volunteer management that can be done virtually. Yeah. Again, thank you everyone for taking out the time and helping us to make this a successful event.